Okay, 253. Before we do this, I have an introduction. This one's for Barry. No, I'm just kidding. This is for the recording. Anybody on the recordings, they should know this. This is for the rants. I've been thinking about this no rant business, so I have some musar to give. Okay, this is my musar for the no rants.
That's where the spontaneity comes in.
So I'm going to tell you the truth. You've heard me. How many times have you heard me quote Rav Peretz before? Many times. How many times have I ever quoted for you Rav Peretz's interpretation of Shulchan Aruch?
Well, I know you follow his halacha a lot.
But I quoted to you.
No.
What if I told you that most hours of my life I studied Shulchan Aruch with Rabbi Peretz? That's where I know him from.
Right.
But that's not where I learned Torah from. I learned Shulchan Aruch from Rav Peretz, but I didn't learn Torah from the Shulchan Aruch with Rav Peretz. I learned that from walking with him, from talking with him, from sitting with him, from the things that he said between the pages of Shulchan Aruch, from the times where he came in to give a Shulchan Aruch class and he never ended up giving a Shulchan Aruch class because something else was more important. And this is my point. The point is that Torah is not a college course. There's no agenda, there's no goal, there's no we have to hit a certain amount of pages or a certain amount of chapters in a certain place. But we have a problem. And the problem is that we were raised in a very artificial education system. How many of you have ever studied math since you left school? Studied, not used it, studied it.
What?
Math.
You mean studied on the side or studied?
Yeah, you all take out your old textbooks and reread them.
Just upon integration or,
No, I had a roommate who did it because he was a math grad student, but that was the culture.
And then once he finished his math grad studies?
No, I don't know what he did afterwards.
So maybe he worked in it, but didn't keep studying it. And I'm explaining to you what I mean. Torah is a very different discipline. Torah doesn't work that way. There's no, and we've almost done a disservice. Even part of being a rabbi is like you have to study X, Y, and Z to be a rabbi. That's also a very artificial process. Torah can't be put into courses, into 45-minute periods. Torah is something that you keep learning. There's never a time where a person says, "Oh, okay, I did it. I learned it. I know it." Someone once told me, "Rabbi, I don't come to classes. I was in yeshiva already in high school."
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. So you know everything you need to know. Because Torah is a different thing. And the way Torah is learned is not just in the books, but it's the discussions that come from the books, it's the approach that we have to the rest of the world. Imagine if you walked away from Kollel, and the only thing you had ever learned with me is about who's kosher to twist the strands of the tzitzit, and which plant can make a kosher tzitzit from. Most of you will never come back here. And I'm asking you one thing, your Yetzer Hara of being raised in this country or countries similar to it, that has taught you that learning means accomplishing a certain amount of, covering a certain amount of ground, knowing a certain amount of quantifiable information, being able to pass it. That's called learning. Other things are just discussions. They're nice group study, but it's not a real study of something, of a content. We didn't look enough in the book. I don't blame you. That's the way the world was. That's the way we were all taught. Even I was taught that way until I met Israel and then Rav Peretz. But in retrospect, I can tell you that that's not the way we learn Torah. And so, even if we're going to do now Shulchan Aruch for 15 minutes, this is 15 minutes of Shulchan Aruch, but you've already been learning Torah for an hour.
Right.
And that's something that, don't get frustrated at yourself. Definitely not at me. Don't get frustrated at yourself. We didn't cover enough ground. We didn't get that far. It's not the way Torah works. Torah doesn't happen that way. Torah is by moving, and you can, by the way, if you want to do Shulchan Aruch like 30 times by the time we get, if you want to finish, Shulchan Aruch was meant to be read once a month. The whole code of Jewish law. So if you want to do that every day to finish your 10 chapters of Shulchan Aruch, sure, Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote Shulchan Aruch in 30 volumes. In order that every day you can learn one book.
It's good bedtime reading.
Yeah. That was the point. Rabbi Yosef Karo writes in the introduction to Shulchan Aruch, he said, I wrote this book for women and children.
Oh no.
Do you understand what has happened? Today rabbis have to learn for years to get smicha in Shulchan Aruch. But he wrote, it's an introduction to Shulchan Aruch. I wrote this book for women and children who are not able to understand my Bet Yosef. So if you want to run through Shulchan Aruch, you're more than welcome. But our pace will be dictated by how the natural flow of Torah has to happen. I'm very happy to have a group like that. But I see sometimes people that are a little frustrated, a little nervous. Don't worry about it. It's the way that Torah works. So on page 253, the laws of
So again,
Tzitzit.
the principle of the thing too, even with something like, as you say, would you come back for a twist in the string or the blue Kehillat and so forth. So the principle there can be applied to so many other things in life.
Of course.
And sharpen your mind and help you pay attention to things in one's spiritual life that are important. It's like there was that section we read Friday night on where it talks about the type of wax used for candle and so forth. Well, who was the rabbi again who we follow after the Arizal?
Rashash?
Yes.
Okay, Rabbi Shalom Sharabi?
No.
Rabbi Chaim Vital?
Rabbi Chaim Vital, yes, thank you. He said that he wrote a commentary on that section saying that this is the type of neshama and how it gets lit with the extra neshama of Shabbat. He made a whole
Kabbalistic understanding of these
that.
Mishnah, which we think are pretty simple.
Yeah.
Sure, I believe it.
So that type of thing. So many levels that one can pick up from just seemingly quote-unquote mundane details.
Very good. So page 253. Let's see inside.
It's not easy.
Well, that's applying is the hard part. Learning is easy. 253. Says Maran. We're talking now about where do you put the hole for the strings in the corner of the tzitzit. You know what I'm saying? In your tzitzit you have corners. Where do you put the hole? Yasen nekev be'orech hatalit. You should make a hole literally on the length of the talit. Okay, let's keep going. Lo lemala mishalosh etzbaot, not higher than 3 finger breadths. So I guess not further from the corner. I mean the edge of the talit than this. You shouldn't put the tzitziot in the middle of the clothing. Haga hainu gudalin. He's saying fingers meaning thumbs. In halakha today we are accustomed that it's about 2 centimeters. So it shouldn't be more than 6 centimeters away from the corner. Because more inwards than that is no longer called the corner of the clothing.
How do they determine this particular one?
Probably in the Gemara, we're going to see it on the bottom a little bit deeper than this.
Well, it makes sense.
It seems to have been a logical discussion of, where's the corner of the table? Is this the corner of the table?
No.
Is this the corner? Like, imagine it was I actually had a corner, not a round. Is this the corner?
I can't see, but it looks like it.
Is this the corner?
No.
Why not? What's the difference in this and this?
Well, one turns, one goes, that's the corner. And then
Where it stops turning to where it stops turning.
Okay, what about here?
No.
Why not?
It's in the middle of the table.
Okay, so you have a lot of places that are not the corner.
Yeah.
So what our rabbis came to the conclusion that there's a reasonable amount of space where you would still call this the corner before it becomes the actual clothing. And however they determined this, if it was by taking a pole in the street or they were busy coming up with halachic reasons for it, it can't be more than 3 finger breadths from the corner. So you would have to make a 3 by 3 around the corner, and that would be your space.
With the table, there's a very simple way to do it.
I know how they came up with the 3 fingers.
Yeah?
Because you drink really good fine scotch, drink 3 fingers.
Oh yeah, that's the
There you go.
measurement.
It's no longer called a corner. And it cannot be lower than mikshir sheyesh mikesher gudal ad sof hatziporen.
So is this quantified, or is this depends on who makes the tali?
This is both. Obviously, if Og Melech HaBashan is making a talit, is the giant Og, so his thumbs are going to be different than ours. But it's about the average person's measurements. What's your English on this? It's from the knuckle until...
You want to hear the English? I don't think you want to hear the English.
Velo lamata. What's the second part?
Okay.
It's no longer called a corner, and it cannot be...
It can't be below the measurement from the joint of the thumb until the nail, since it says on the corner.
Okay.
If it was below the full measurement, made from the joint of the thumb, it is below the corner and invalid.
Right, okay, so that's... Right. You see this space from the thumb until the nail? That's as far as it can be from the corner itself.
Oh. Okay.
Oh.
That's not
Is that what
very
it's saying?
much.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's what we call in Chinese medicine a body inch. And it varies from person to person because some people have longer fingers, some have shorter. So in measuring their acupuncture points, you use 3 of their fingers to find it as opposed to 3 of yours.
Really?
However, on something like a garment, you're saying then that the garment is relative to...
No. So wait, but don't get stuck. Both of you are asking the same question.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck on this yet. Let's first figure out the halakha. The halakha is it cannot be farther than 3 finger spaces,
Okay.
and it cannot be closer than this amount of space
Okay.
from the knuckle to the nail on your thumb.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fair.
Because, and he's going to say why. Mishum shneimar, because it says in Bamidbar al hakanaf. It has to actually be on the corner. Vim haya lemata mimile kesher godel haya tachat hakanaf. Interesting. And he says that the corner right here is actually not the corner anymore. This would be considered like under the corner. The corner is within a certain amount of space, but not beyond a certain amount of space.
So it's actually a corner would have to be a certain distance away from the actual corner.
From the 9.
Comes the Rama. Says the Rama, "Umodedin ze biyosher." We measure this straight, velo ba'olachson min hakeren, and not in a angle. Give me the English words that I want to be using. What does the Rama say?
They say this is measured straight. I have no idea what measured straight.
Okay, and not.
And not diagonally from the corner.
Okay,
But what does measured straight mean?
my assumption is he's talking about the long side of the talit. The long side of the talit, you're measuring here,
Yeah.
not here.
Right.
Yeah.
Straight along the
Not
edge
diagonal.
versus diagonally going in.
You're measuring this way or this way, but not this way.
Not diagonally.
Yeah. I would say
And
not
I'm assuming that
diagonally,
if you do the math, there's a different distance between here and here. Very easy to do it. Look, see it? It's
Yeah,
not
well-
the same.
Well, one's a hypotenuse and one is
Whatever you said, I haven't opened up my
It's a
math
right
books
angle.
at school either.
That's okay.
Pythagorean theorem.
So here, we find the discussion of where do you put the tzitziot on the corner. Now, I want to address your issue about is it objective, subjective. In general, in halakha, when halakha gives you measurements, it's not talking about your specific case. Rather, in general. In general is a very strange thing. What does it mean? Every person is different. If you were to take the average height of, the average length of, the average so on and so forth, there are a few measurements that are subjective. Perhaps the amount you drink for kiddush or such things. But here we're talking about objective measurements that everyone's supposed to be able to reach a conclusion for. I would wonder if we would go around the room and measure the length here, if it's really that different. Now, meaning if you would put them all together and then come out to the number, if it really would change much. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein has a famous story with Rabbi Telner, Rabbi Yosef Telner, my Rabbi. Rabbi Yosef Telner went to ask him how big is a tefach. A tefach is 4 fingers of a fist. So like this, it's a measurement. You find very often it has to be 10 tvachim or 3 tvachim. It's a measurement we use a lot. It's your fist without the thumbs, so 4 fingers. And if every finger is 2 centimeters, it'll be 8 centimeters about. So Moshe Feinstein said, I don't know the question. It's like this. And Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was a very short man. Very short. And Rabbi Telner was a little bit like, is it your fist or my fist? And Moshe smiled, and he already knew what he was going to ask. He said, our fist is the same size. I'm a small man, but my fists are the same size. And he held it up to Rabbi Telner. Rabbi Telner said that was true. They were the same size fist. On average. So you're not going to say, my tzitzit are not kosher because my thumb is different than... About the general height, the general length, the general size of such things.
Would you say it's true in general of halachic measurements?
Yes, halachic measurements were meant to give you, the person... Chazal had a number in mind. They had, let's say, 2 centimeters in mind. They didn't have a way to record 2 centimeters. If they wrote 2 centimeters, what are you going to do with it today? When you didn't use that, like it was called 2, colonimuses. What would you do with it today? So people trying to break their heads, trying to figure out, so what is that? How do you weigh it? And the few measurements that our rabbis did give us in lengths and measure, that's where everyone's arguing. How long is a parsa? How long is a meal? The things they gave us, it's an olive, it's an egg, we almost always know they were giving us a measurement that you could find in your kitchen, but you're not going to go to your next job and say, because this egg in my refrigerator is smaller than the egg in your refrigerator. We're not working that. It's not that menial. It's in general.
It gets confusing some places whether kazayat or revi'it in terms of food, or as we were discussing last week before Pesach, the amount of matzah you eat in one sitting, and that this one book had, okay, here's the page, and here's how big it should be, and this you have like so many point seconds to consume it to fulfill the mitzvah, right? You do have something more of like an almost a what's the term? An absolute, like a measurement.
Right, and again, these measurements are also not absolute. I'll tell you what I mean. A person will. I want to think of an example here. It says in the calendar that sunset's going to be at 7:32. That little Jewish calendar with all the times. And you're standing outside, it's 7:33, and the sun's still visible. Not light, sun. You're wherever you're at the beach, I don't know, wherever you're at. You see it's not sunset yet. Just because on the calendar it says 7:32. There's a certain 7:33. The one who at 7:32 stopped praying mincha didn't do anything wrong. That says everyone's using their own. It's around the same time frame of the 7:30 somethings, which is why most of those calendars have the integrity to write at the bottom. Don't rely on these calendars to the last minute. It's not. I've seen shuls that have atomic clocks, and it's not in order to make sure people come on time. It's to make sure that when it says that sunrise is going to be at 6:41, 6:41 or so. What happens if you pray at 6:45? You miss sunrise? No way. Sunrise lasts for a certain amount of time. Maybe, but it's a good.
It does make a difference when, for example, you're davening mincha and it's beyond the point where you can daven. It gets to be dark, so
you can only have the truth of where you're at right now.
Yeah,
that would be a. All right, so let's see the notes here on the bottom. We have a few minutes. Makom hanekev shematilim bo tzitziot bechnafot hatalit. The placement of the hole where you put the tzitziot in the corner of the talit. Lamed Alef. You see Lamed Alef? It's on 253, the bottom on 2 lines. Ne'emar b'Torah. It says in the Torah, in the book of Bamidbar, in the 15th chapter, in 38th verse. Vasu lehem tzitzit. Al kanfei bigdehem. We have this in Shema. V'hainu, it means shetzarich le'atil hatzitziot, that you must put the tzitziot not anywhere you want in the talit. There's a Christian website that sells Judaica for Christians, and they've invented something great, which is clip-on tzitziot. They have the tassels that clip onto your belt. They missed the whole point. It has to be attached to an article of clothing. It has to be in the corners. The strings are not the mitzvah alone. There's things that have to do with it. For a kid who doesn't like wearing tzitziot and he wants the rabbis to think he's wearing tzitziot, this might be a good trick. But I don't know he can get away with their tie-dye colored tzitziot. But in general, this tzitzit has to be on the corner of the clothing. And what it means on the corner, there's a specific area of the corner where you put the tzitziot. V'lamala mikanaf habeged enonika kanaf ela beged. Above the corner is no longer called the corner, rather it's now called the clothing, the rest of the article of clothing. Ulamata min kanaf enonika kanaf ela keren. And beneath the corner, in English we don't have really this differentiation, but I'll give you the best English words I can. Beneath the corner, it's no longer called, too close to the corner is no longer called the corner, rather it's called the point. The corner doesn't mean it should be as close to that point as possible, but it should be in this corner, and actually too close to the edge might not be considered the corner. And therefore you should put the tzitziot in this corner, the proper place on the clothing. V'yaseh nekev bekanaf habeged v'yatil bo tzitziot, and you make a hole, and you put the tzitziot inside of it. I believe that we will talk about how many holes, what kind of holes. Some Hasidim have a custom to put 2 holes and then put the tzitziot through. I've never seen that before. Have you seen this before? 2 holes?
2 holes in
Yeah, can you show us an example?
Maybe. Depends on the chassid. Ever seen that before?
Oh, yes. In Denver, I used to see a lot of the Taliesim have that.
Now, that's how Chabad does 2 holes on the clothing, meaning one here and one right in the corner. Other Hasidim have 2 holes right next to each other here, 2 holes, and they loop the tzitziot so they're kind of sitting. I'm trying to figure out how to show it to you. That they're kind of coming out of both holes. They're not sitting on the corner like this, but they sit over there, right on the holes. Everyone has their own reasons for this. We're going to talk about it. It's actually a custom from the Arizal. And this custom was prevalent in most of Europe. I don't know about in Germany, but in like wherever Hasidim were, even way before there were Hasidim, the Arizal did this on his tzitzit katan, but not on his big talit. And when Rav Chaim Vital was asked about it, Rav Chaim Vital said, the Arizal told us that it's not the correct way to do a talit. But he did it because that's the pair of tzitzit he had, that's the way he was raised. He was raised Ashkenazi, and that was his family's custom, so he continued doing it. But he instructed Rabbi Chaim Vital not to do so on his own talit. And that's why it's one of those customs of the Arizal that students of the Arizal don't do. Interestingly enough. For a different time. Just one more sentence. Mukom kanaf, the corner, yesh limdod misvat habeged beorach uverochav. You measure from the edge of the cloth, both in the length and the width. Betoch shalosh etzbaot shel adam benoni. 3 finger spaces of a regular person, an average person. That's not regular, average.
I'm glad they added that.
Okay, this is important, and there seems to be a footnote here. And maybe next week we'll take care of. Oh, it's a long footnote. Look, it goes on page 254 and then on 255. Okay, so maybe we'll do that next week. But just to finish the sentence, ולמעלה ממנו קשר גודל, היינו מתחילת הציפורן, במקום השווה לבשר, האצבע, עד סוף הפרק הראשון. Interesting, he interprets this differently than the way we thought. That from the knuckle until where the nail and the flesh are equal. Okay, so if your nail goes out to here, it doesn't give you a longer tzitziot. It's from that place, so this much room. Not that much room, this much room. I wonder if you want to go home, do an experiment, and come back with your measurements of this part of your thumb, and we'll do some math and figure out if we're right. But the average human being. And that's how you do this math. But next week we're going to talk about a few other scenarios that are similar to this. Then what happens if you do make it different, and then we'll go perhaps through some different customs about how to, the holes, where they go, how they go, and such things.